Welcome to today's roundtable, Beyond the Noise, Trust, Technology, and the Changing Manufacturing Buyer. I'm Steve Halsey, one of the principals of GNS Business Communications, and I will be your facilitator today. With me are my esteemed guests, Dr. Bill Bryant, who's Director of Marketing for CarbonFree, company focused on helping capture industrial carbon emissions and transforming them into valuable industrial minerals. Bill, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Snehal Desai, who's EVP, Chief Growth and Innovation Officer at Xylem, where they're focused on helping build a more secure water future for the world. Snehal, welcome to today's roundtable.
Good to be with you.
And Beth Crisafi Smith, who's SVP and the Advanced Manufacturing Practice Lead here at GNS, where she's focused on helping innovative companies break through complexity and tell high-impact stories. So, Beth, welcome to the roundtable as well.
Thank you, Steve.
So I'm going to get us started here to talk a little bit about what our focus is going to be today. And we're going to really zero in on three shifts that are reshaping industrial and advanced manufacturing, marketing, and communications. GEO is one, or generative engine optimization, how trust is changing in this current landscape, and what we're seeing with changing buyers. And I think what's interesting about our panelists is each has decades of experience supporting sales, marketing, comms in the advanced manufacturing space, both with Fortune 50 companies as well as innovative startups and virtually everything in between. So you guys have seen a lot of change over time. And I guess to set our foundation, we recently conducted a survey of 222 business leaders. Why 222? I'm not sure. An extra two, I guess, just answered that to get us the 222. But what was interesting was nearly 2/3 or 63% say that their companies are actively investing in AI and automation right now. 86% are confident that U.S. manufacturing is globally competitive today. So to me, I think that's a really interesting place to start because it captures both the urgency of trying to evolve and then also the opportunity. So let's talk about GEO in this new visibility landscape. And, Beth, you're really seeing that manufacturing and industrial buyers are searching differently than they were a year ago, 18 months ago, 2 years ago. AI engines have really become the new front door, and a company's reputation increasingly appears before somebody's even clicked on a link. So essentially, if you're not visible in AI, you're not visible at all. I mean, what are you seeing from where you're sitting, counseling companies on how to communicate in this landscape?
Yeah, we've been tracking this for a while, Steve. And actually, there was some recent B2B research that just came out that sort of confirmed this thought that, preferences are really shifting towards these AI-powered tools to even start their search. And so this survey actually looked at B2B buyers, and it said that B2B software buyers found that nearly half of them actually start their search through AI-powered tools instead of Google. And what was crazy to me was that that's actually a 71% increase from 4 months ago. So people are absolutely, especially in the B2B space, turning to AI to start their search. And so as communicators, we've been starting to take a step back and look at AI and these large language models almost as like a new target audience for us, because we're working hard to try to get our clients to show up in these large language models. And the thing about advanced manufacturing is I feel like it almost works in our favor for those who've communicated in the advanced manufacturing space, because these large language models kind of thrive on that complex storytelling. And when you break it down in a way that's easy to understand, that's tailored to the target audience. So to be honest, as someone who communicates in the advanced manufacturing space, this is really exciting because it's taking what we always strive to do and is now using that in a way that helps with our clients' authority, their visibility. And so it's kind of a really exciting space to be in, to know that people are turning towards AI for that first, look before they're even reaching out for a sale.
Now, Snehal, you guys have a pretty robust communications vehicle talking to a lot of different audiences. How are you seeing things changes in your world and what you guys are trying to do from your growth and marketing strategy?
Yeah, it's it's moving fast. And what's really showing up. So for our business, there's quite a bit of work that we do, through our value chain, anywhere from a utility operator to engineering firms, could be a system integrator that's supporting all that. And historically, we would have tried to figure out either something very targeted for each one of those or kind of show a whole big story. But what's interesting is that, to what Beth just described, a lot of our key work starts with the engineering firms, and they are increasingly spending their time in LLMs to do their research on behalf of their clients. And if you haven't really created your content, and we've done some study of our own content and how we're showing up, the good news is we're showing up okay. The opportunity is to be better, but it is around some of the generic nature of some of the things we might have done in the past for awareness building isn't really as interesting as the specific nature of what it is that we say and do and how we talk to, like this, like I'll call it the FAQ of it all. Because people don't want to hear about the big fancy story. They have questions and they want answers. And so we're really starting to create content that really addresses it from that point of view, rather than necessarily trying to pitch them. Because these are, as we say, the people, time and money, and they're really trying to get faster using these tools. So we want to make it easier. So that's kind of how it's showing up. And depending on the end market, it might be a little tweaked, but that construct is where we're headed.
So, Bill, what about where you sit? So much of what you guys have done over time have been really more of kind of one-on-one sales, but now you're in this different environment. So how does that change how you're looking at and thinking about your marketing and communication strategies?
Absolutely. So we're a small firm, and we are, really a startup. And I come from the old school, and our industry is really in the industrial minerals and the rocks that go into different products. So it's much more of a Flintstones type environment. So it takes us longer to adapt to these types of new technologies. So we are more along the lines of using outside help, consultancies, agencies, and things like that to help drive where we go forward with our marketing plans. We use it, however, on the research side, depending on what discipline you're in, from procurement to engineering to commercial. It really helps you hone in your search and how you're targeting what you're looking for, until you get to the point where you then can say, hey, I got to spend a little bit more money or focus on this certain aspect where some of these, AI type tools don't get there yet for various reasons. One thing is like a paywall, things like that are in your way. But it definitely helps you figure out how you can get there faster to that's where you can concentrate where you want to spend your dollars rather than spending dollars everywhere.
Well, and one of the things I think was interesting, there's a company called Muckrack. So their technology company really focuses on what reporters are talking, media monitoring, those sorts of things. And they ran an experiment earlier this year where they did 1 million queries to really see how the large language models were working. And I think one of the things that was most interesting was the most frequently cited day of a source was yesterday. So it's constantly the day before. So it's constantly out there looking for information. And so in areas that you would expect, like policy or what are the markets doing or that kind of analysis, a lot of data. But I think where the opportunity is for advanced manufacturing companies, once you start getting into more of those niche sectors, you really need to make sure your information is going to be there. Otherwise, they're going to be fighting your competitors. So Beth, as you look from where you sit, how do you help companies appeal to both the individual and the machine?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of that now has to do with kind of bridging that gap between sales and marketing. I mean, over the past 20 years, I've started to see this kind of divide between, okay, we're in our silos doing this, you're in your silos doing that. And we're looking at kind of synthetic audiences and how they're operating, and they're actually on the front lines talking to people. And there's a need now to really bridge that gap to make sure that, everyone knows and is informed about what's going on one side versus the other to really pull through and reach that audience.
So Snehal, you had talked about so many different audiences that you guys are trying to reach. Have you found kind of this process of trying to appeal more to the large language model Has it been liberating? Has it been constraining? What are some of the challenges of trying to make sure you're instantly found by multiple audiences, and then also just supporting that cadence of content to make sure you're the one that's being found?
Yeah, it's a good question. So first of all, I think in not too long ago, the diversity of end market, and then depending on the end market, the number of different personas, just the ability to implement that has always been daunting. So you're always having to make trade-offs. What's starting to emerge, and I'd say we were still early days, is we're using AI in the production process so that we're actually not finding ourselves, incrementally spending the same dollar and cutting it into 100 pieces to try to serve all these markets. That's where utilizing, whether it's AI writing platforms that help you essentially check your content for its appeal to an LLM is not something that a natural writer and marketer would necessarily be doing. And so we're using those kind of guides. And then things like, multi-language, which would again kind of just throw all kinds of grit into your gear about how fast you can go. There's pieces of the production process that are also lending themselves quite easily to being able to, customize at scale, and then also be able to be a little more current by thinking about some of the existing vehicles. I mean, YouTube actually surprisingly is pretty interesting, and has always been, but now it's being pulled in as relatively strong in the LM network. LinkedIn, I mean, it's showing up. I think the more they crawl these things, they're going to see that, wow, there's a lot of stuff that we might have thought nobody was watching that is now being pulled into the LLM. So I think it's just kind of the tools that we have, and then the ability to take what might have been just a daunting exercise and being able to scale that such that you can show up in those places without breaking the bank.
I think that's an interesting point. And speaking of without breaking the bank, it's actually, I think it's like 95% of links cited by AI actually come from non-paid sources. And that reinforces really that importance of media relations. And what we're doing is like looking at reporters who have a high authority score and maybe pitching them instead so that, the information comes up in the search. And like you said, the blog content, the website content, the shared content, I mean, 95% from non-paid sources. I mean, it's going back to kind of the basics of what we've done as communicators 20 years ago now, but now using it for a much more modern way.
Well, yeah, I think really that ability to tell that complete story is really key to really how do we build trust in a high scrutiny manufacturing environment that we're facing right now. And I thought another couple of points were interesting from that survey that we conducted a few weeks ago, is that when we asked executives, how do you view or how do you think about the industrial and advanced manufacturing market? It was really what you would expect: very innovative, very essential, very competitive. But also, they said that trust isn't automatic, right? It's really got to be earned. And the biggest priorities that were listed by the executives were: number one, improving product quality; number two, cutting costs; number three, adopting advanced technology. So we're really operating in an environment that's more defined by complexity, risk, regulatory pressure, longer, more kind of cautious decision cycles. So I guess, Bill, I'll throw this one to you. As an industrial minerals company, you really need to have a pass-through story of what you guys are doing with the minerals, with the decarbonization, how that empowers something else that then ultimately empowers what goes to a consumer. So what are the keys from your perspective in how you build trust and how that story needs to kind of transcend through your supply chain?
A lot of it has to do with what type of message you're bringing to the marketplace itself. We actually have gone from a platform of being a green solution to the world to more of a supplier of a sustainable mineral. And so just even changing that message is critical. And so being able to do that more efficiently and also to tailor it to different markets. For instance, we're recognizing that we need to do a rebrand for our products because the brand that we have in place currently established relies too heavily in one side of the spectrum of different types of markets. So therefore we need to redirect it to another one. But with these with GEOs, we can do this a lot more efficiently, as long as we build that from the beginning very smartly. However, it also gives you the option to pivot fairly easily as well.
Yeah, I think that it's really interesting to see how the nuance of that story, particularly when it gets passed through or when you're either validating somebody else's claim about decarbonization or sustainability, or about if it's about product quality, I think is key. Snehal, how about where you guys operate? You know, water is one of those things that people don't think about until they need to think about it. So huge challenges of trust if things are going well or if they're not. So how are you guys really balancing? How do you build trust in this current environment?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, there's a few ways it's happening. First of all, for those that are in the, I'll call it the technical part of our value chain, I think we're actually seeing opportunities to take content that we might have relegated to a technical session at a conference in a room with like 5 people, and finding a way to elevate that and make it much more accessible. In the past, we might have not thought about it in terms of that, because we would have said, well, that's for a certain audience. But there's relevant information in there. Number one, it is around being able to show the proof, right? That's part of how we all think of as engineers, is you need to see the data. Second is we're finding that a nameless, faceless story about a thing is not nearly as interesting as a specialist and a person that has credibility and has industry connectivity. And so we're taking more effort to be able to highlight some of our experts and bring them to fore, because I think that starts to build that trust. Even better is if a customer's telling the story, because that's the ultimate, when they're telling stories to each other. So there's that whole piece there. We really see the opportunity to kind of get away from the skepticism that folks think of when they say, well, I'm just being pitched, and really think about it as of someone that they could see themselves understanding and recognizing as an expert and or a credible source. The other thing for us, and this is kind of shifting it completely because it doesn't always show up for a lot of folks, there's a lot of education and trust building that goes on with the public consumer. So even as a B2B company, when you think about a question coming from a constituency about, is my water safe? What is PFAS? There's like these very basic questions, and we have content on that. Now, where is the best vehicle and how is the best way to make that available? We have to think now a little differently than we might have thought about in the past, because they very well could be looking for both an understanding of the topic, but then also ultimately they'd like to know, well, who are some of the companies that are out there solving for it? Doesn't mean that a consumer's going to buy things from us, but building that value chain trust all the way down to those that you're trying to help understand the so what and why. I mean, it's a way to think about your audience, but putting people and stories and ultimately credible voices, that's where the movement is. And I think a lot of people were doing that. It's just kind of looking at all the content you might have generated over time. You could probably refresh it all, and because the data is still the data in most cases. It's just finding a way to repackage and bring it forward in a different format.
So Beth, from where you said, how are you counseling companies with the best ways to build trust, and how do they need to sustain that over time?
It's so funny because Snehal basically took the words out of my mouth. One of the things that we have been doing is counseling them on using your experts more, because in this increasingly AI-driven world, people still want to hear from people and they trust people. And so being able to deliver that message in a way that's really authoritative, using the experts who know what they're talking about, is a great way to, impact trust and to make them feel like they can trust a company. And I think what struck me, Steve, about the survey that we ran with the business leaders was that they said more than half of leaders say that industrial decarbonization is extremely important. And this shows that sustainability has really become a trust signal and not a side note. And right now, I know a lot of companies are so hesitant to talk about their sustainability message. And I don't think it's just not talking about it. I think it's making sure that it's no longer about goals, what's our goals, but it's the actions that you're taking that are actually helping you achieve those goals, and communicating about it on the way with proof points is okay. And that's helping to establish that further trust.
Mhm. To the point that Beth's talking about, Bill, you spent a lot of time talking to companies in terms of how your products are going to help them achieve some of those goals. Have you seen any shifts in the marketplace lately? I mean, I know there's the shift away from the acronyms, right? ESG, the others, but there's still that forward progress of how do we make the products better? How do we make our sourcing better? How do we have better purity? But what are you hearing most from the marketplace in that in that area?
So if you take sustainability itself, this didn't happen overnight. I mean, the sustainability push has been going on for decades, technically, and now we've run into individuals that at every level in an organization has sustainability as part of their goals and objectives. So with the recent change in the political environment and things like that, yeah, you might have people that are, not being directors of sustainability anymore, but that sustainability aspect, that pillar of the business is still very strong. And everybody in these organizations at every level is considering it as part of what they're doing for their business. It's not going to go away. However, what we need to do is we need to be able to create content that is relevant to those functions. But we also, one thing I think that we need to do as a goal is, and we can do this a lot easier. We used to have very stagnant websites where they sat there for a while. You had paraphernalia that you would give to someone, and it wasn't very refreshed. And now with the changing environment moving so fast, we can utilize the AI technology to generate very profound information very quickly and very prudently for a certain period of time, and then move on to the next level or what have you. So that I think is very critical, and it does having the AI portion of it lowers your cost of doing that update and keeping things up to date as much as possible. So that's something that we need to think about to incorporate into our business because we don't do it today.
And Snehal, how about from your perspective on the part of the sustainability story, the water reuse, all that? Are you telling your story a little bit different now than you were a few years ago, or is it just the same story told through maybe different vehicles or different channels?
I think it's been nuanced a bit, but I think we're pretty international. So while maybe the landscape has shifted a bit here in the US, it hasn't changed that much outside of the US. So the stories have always had to have that balance in them. I think there's increasingly an opportunity to tell the economics conversation alongside the sustainability conversation. That's probably increased more in the last few years. When you look at, for example, the data center sector right now, which is literally keeping everything moving, there is a conversation going on around water reuse as an example, but it's principally not around just simply taking pressure off of the local sources, but it's also around their resilience of the CapEx investment to make sure that they can operate. And, that would have been maybe a slightly different conversation in different sectors a few years back. They would have maybe gone down the path that it's just the right thing to do. But the reality is yes, it is the right thing to do, but it's also an important thing to do as you think about return on capital and resiliency. So I think depending on the different place you are, some of that will play out more, and ability to customize, as Bill said, with economically customize what you're saying into what audience. I think that'll actually be one of the unlocks with what we're able to do today. But as far as ESG in general, I don't think it's really gone away, because the reasons, the ultimate reasons for doing some of these things are around resilience. And
Well, and one of the other things that I think is really interesting too is we're seeing a lot of changes in who we're communicating with the target companies. The manufacturer buying journey has probably changed more in the last 5 years than in the previous 20. And when you look at those kind of priorities that I cited earlier, cost, quality, give me advanced technology, help me achieve decarbonization goal, it's clear that, as you said, Bill, we've got to reach across engineering, procurement, operations, finance, everybody's feeling those pressures. But added to that, we're now getting big generational shifts, which how they think about these issues, how they think about searching, how they think about discovery has changed. So Bill, you said something the other day when we were prepping I thought was really interesting, but maybe you could pick up from there. You said, part of the challenge is you're never talking to just one person, you're talking to the entire organization simultaneously. Can you talk about that a little bit and maybe how that's a little bit different today than it was even 5 years ago?
Absolutely. One of the key aspects of certainly of our business is backdoor selling. And backdoor selling is much more difficult these days because the way you typically backdoor sold was to go to a site and you have your engineer talk to the line personnel, and that line personnel would reveal information about everything. Meanwhile, the sales guy is talking to procurement at the same time, and there are two different messages there. And then you convene in the middle and you share your notes, and then you learn a little bit more about the organization. Well, that's not happening now. I mean, it's harder to do backdoor selling. So that makes your message much more important, that it's tailored to individuals to somehow get that feedback back to us. And I tell you what, I don't have the answers, but if you can figure that out, it's a very good win for your organization.
So Beth, what about from your perspective and just even shifts or changes you've seen and how social channel and social discovery has changed?
Well, I've got to say it's pretty cool that now with AI we can go even deeper into some of these micro audiences. So Bill, how you said, tailoring the message to who you're talking to. I mean, if you're looking at a data center and you're looking at the data center operator versus procurement, being able to use, generative AI to kind of go deeper into, okay, well, what will resonate with them, testing that message out into communications, where are they consuming their information? It's kind of exciting that you can kind of go even deeper now to figure that out. And so we're starting to do that and a lot of sort of persona development to do that for some of our clients. But yeah, I think that's kind of one way that we're looking at it now, in addition to what I said earlier, which was trying to make sure that we're actually talking to the sales folks as well to see what they know and what, the communication, the marketing team knows. So that way we can kind of marry the two up and bridge that gap between sales and marketing to learn more from both sides about what their customers are facing.
So Snehal, with where you sit and as global as your company is, are you seeing divergent paths to purchase emerging around the world, or are you seeing things starting to sync maybe a little bit more than they have in the past?
Well, I mean, for better or worse, the water sector, I wouldn't say is slow, but it moves at very different speeds. And so we have to kind of live in sort of the worlds that we were in and the worlds we're going to. But one thing we're spending more time with is maybe very intentionally spending time with newer generation engineers to make sure that we are catering to how they are, getting information. And that's not always how we've maybe thought about going in and asking questions, right? We always think about decision makers and we always think about, the economic buyer. Well, okay, that's fine. And I think if you only talk to those people, you'll find that they're not very adept at a lot of these tools. And so therefore you could convince yourself, just keep doing what you're doing. However, if you actually, combine the fact that just on a straight B2B basis, 60+% of homework is done before anybody ever calls anybody, that doesn't really matter what age you are. So you already had to kind of go down the path of making your content much more available and targeted. But now if you start to pay attention to some of the folks that are more technology savvy and, for better or worse, does skew younger, we are spending time to understand, does the design engineer in Singapore and or India and or Germany and or, Chicago, are they same or different? Because we are finding some differences for sure. But at the same time, we're trying to think about that as an audience base, because eventually they will be making all the decisions and they'll have done it with all these tools. So it's, you kind of have to live in sort of the worlds that we have, because, we don't have monolithic customers to the extent that they're all going to adopt something tomorrow. If they did, that would also make the sector go faster, but that's a whole different podcast.
Well, and one of the things I also think is kind of interesting, and we've kind of briefly touched on it, but one of the things about AI is it's serving up answers in places that it previously wouldn't, right? So the public doesn't really fully understand manufacturing, but they may start to get manufacturing messages delivered as part of their searches and queries, which, you know, for good or bad, I guess, has the ability to put a company kind of front and center in terms of these broader issues. So, thinking about that, and I'll throw this out to whoever wants to jump ball on this one first. What parts of your story do we need to think about in the past that, again, your focus is heavy B2B, but what kind of thought needs to be given to consumers who may stumble across your information and the story that needs to be told to them?
I could probably, I think I spoke a little bit to that with the fact that, on the topic like water quality, water scarcity, lots of people are looking for answers to the state of affairs, right? And so that is part of some of the content that we were already generating, but in a way we were kind of relegating it to maybe newsletters, or sometimes just making it available like on the sustainability section of our website, where there was some general education going on for, quite honestly, an audience sometimes it isn't so much consumer, but it is, I'll call it non-technical sometimes, right? And I think there's probably more opportunity for us to build that more into the searchability through the LLMs to make sure. And I mentioned it before, through our research, amping up your FAQs is a great way to not have to redesign your entire website, because the FAQ area is going to get found more frequently. And you could then tune it into the people that you want to make sure get a message without completely rewiring everything. So that's at least a way that we're thinking about it.
And like Bill said, now it's quicker to do that, to update it, to add things in, to, so it's low hanging fruit.
And another element of the getting that to the surface is when you have, taglines and things like that that bring attention to those that are searching. The attention span is much shorter now, and whenever people are doing anything, myself included. So it doesn't matter who's out there. So if you've got things as part of your business that are first, or world's first, or something that is, predicated on something that's not been done before, they'll start to bring headlines into the story, and therefore they get picked up by more of these, these libraries out there for the searching. And that's kind of, I think, a key thing is where you can, if you look at your business from a headline perspective, that might be something that drives more of the traffic to where you are, rather than having this long thought out, well-developed story. And Snehal, what you're saying is that you can get that long drawn out portion later and keep it up to date. And when people really want to dig into it, it's there. Yes. But, I think like a kind of a headline type approach to the way you promote your business might be a little bit different than what was done before.
I think that's an interesting way to think about, is to, how do you address the question and then leave breadcrumbs. If you want to go deeper, we'll transparently go as deep as you need to go. So how about a little lightning round? I mean, we're in a really noisy environment right now, a lot of hype, economic uncertainty, constant information overload. Beth, what's one piece of advice you would give to industrial and advanced manufacturing marketers and communicators, what they should really think about in 2026?
I think it's really about having a clear message. I think it's telling the story about how you're helping customers solve their complexity, not just showcasing your capabilities, but translating those capabilities into the way that really signals to your customers how you're helping them and helping them with their end message. And that has to be articulated in a very clear way from the beginning. You need to know what the benefit is to who you're selling to. So, for example, if you're, selling to an automotive OEM, you're not just selling thermal protection materials for EV batteries. What you're selling and communicating to that OEM is that, hey, these thermal protection materials are going to help deliver on your core EV value proposition to your end consumer around safety, around reliability, around longer lasting vehicles to help, get rid of that the range anxiety that people have. And so you're reaching them with a very clear message, but on a more emotional level. That's going to help cut through the clutter, because it kind of goes back to the FAQs. You're answering, what does it matter to me, right off the bat, instead of dancing around it, doing more, kind of very fluffy storytelling. You're getting straight to it with, this is why it matters to you. And I think that's going to be so important to get through that noise going into 2026.
Bill, what about you? What is your advice for your peer set on how to stay focused through the noise and chaos?
I think from our perspective, responsiveness is very key. And the difficulty, I think, even today with what all the information that's out there that people can get very quickly, as long as it's available in a quick fashion, the follow-up to that. And follow-up is such an old adage to sales and marketing. If somebody comes in and sees you and then you never talk to them again, we talked about earlier, trust. That just breaks the trust. And they're not going to continue to come back to you. And we don't sell our products on a fly-by-night situation. So it's a long, drawn-out sales process. And so if you're not doing that responsive nature as well as that follow-up, then that's really going to cripple you in this environment.
And Snehal, how about from you? What's your sage advice for your peers?
I think Beth and Bill both hit on really important ones. I was going to say that, we talk about, people talk about customer centricity a lot. But I think that the missing link often is not so much thinking about the customer and then let me tell you why it's good for you, but to have sort of that mindset of what could possibly be on their mind. And what could they be worried about? What would they be doing in the rest of their day? I mean, there's so much to be said for being able to just kind of walk a little bit inside that decision maker's shoes, such that the answers you're providing are ones that address the kind of question they'll ask. We have the tools now that you can dial things in a lot more precisely to be able to get to the right voice and the right kind of information and show up in the right places.
That's great advice all around. And we've covered a lot in the last 40 minutes, just really talking about the impact of AI and GEO, what we're seeing in terms of how do you continue to build and communicate trust in this environment, and then even the changing shape of buyers. So, Bill, Snehal, Beth, thank you so much for joining us here to talk about Beyond the Noise, Trust, Technology, and a Changing Manufacturing Buyer. It's been a fascinating discussion. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.